everyone, welcome back to my channel Hasty Books. I'm Camilla. Today is part 2 of my favorite books. I've done part 1 of this list of favorite books on Tuesday, so I'll link below so you can go and see my favorite non-fiction reads. And today we're gonna dive right in with my 10 favorite fiction books. 10 because I couldn't actually narrow it down. I have to add obviously like a little caveat that these lists are kind of ever evolving. You would have asked me last year, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and my list would have been completely different. Actually, some of my favorite books I've read in the last few months. So it's constantly changing, and you know, my taste is changing, but also I'm reading new books. So things are shifting. So, you know, this is to be taken with a grain of salt. At the moment, these are the books that I definitely recommend. And, you know, maybe next year I'll do a different video and there'll be a different list. Alright, let's dive right in. The first book on my list today is How to Stop Time by Matt Haig. I really enjoy Haig's writing. I've read quite a few of his books. Midnight Library last year was really excellent, but this one I think was my first of his books that I read, but also it kind of stayed with me because I'm a sucker for stories about people that age really slowly or don't age, or you know, don't die. So I don't know why I'm obsessed with it. And so this book follows the main character Tom, who basically has this condition where he ages really slowly, and you follow him kind of through the centuries, and it's very bittersweet but kind of hopeful. And I don't know, it kind of lifted my mood a little bit. I really enjoyed it, so I decided to include it on this list. Next we have The Secret History by Donna Tartt. I really wanted to include Tartt on this list because I'm a really big fan of hers. Her stories really draw you in with the different mysteries and the relationships, and they kind of build, because they're quite long books, and they kind of really build their way around the characters. And she has some really amazing observations and situations about kind of human life and human problems that sometimes I don't enjoy. But yeah, it's really good. Actually, here it says haunting, compelling, and brilliant, which actually is 3 words I would definitely use to describe Tartt's writing. And The Secret History, as of now, is still my favorite one of her books. It is almost like a classic college novel, but with a twist. And it is well written, and it is a page turner. You'll want to know what happened and what's about to happen and keep going. So next we have The Map of Salt and Stars by Zain Jukadar. I picked up this arc a couple years ago and I really enjoyed it. It really stayed with me. So I wanted to include on this list because I don't know if many people will know about it, and I really wanted to highlight it because it is actually a really good read. It follows a little girl, Noor. Her family moves back to Syria from the US, and this is just as the war is kind of starting in Syria, so they get stuck in that. In the midst of that, she's kind of really immersed in the myths and tales of the region, so she follows the adventure of Rawiya. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing anything. Yeah, so I think it was a great book to kind of delve into the myths and stories of the Middle East, and it was really relevant as well to the current period because they go through the whole refugee path where they escape from Syria and try to make their way to reconnect as a family because they lose track of each other. So it is really wonderful, and it follows Noor, so it's kind of following a child's perspective of the situation, which is always very touching. And yeah, so if you haven't heard of it, I would definitely recommend looking into it because it is really well written. It's a really engaging storyline, and the characters are just very compelling. Next we have De Quoi t'ennuies-tu, Evelyne from Gabrielle Roy. Roy is actually an amazing French-Canadian writer. She is probably one of the best Canadian writers of the 20th century, especially when you look at the French. So she's really good. I've read quite a lot of her books, but this one is actually a short novella, and my mom brought it for me as a gift, and I really enjoyed it. It follows Evelyne. She goes on a bus journey from Canada to the US to go see her brother, and it's just really sweet the way that she has these memories of her childhood and her life, but also connects with the people that she meets on the bus. It is really lovely. I would definitely recommend, if you speak French obviously, but if you don't, to pick up some of Gabrielle Roy's translated work. She's won loads of awards, so she's really good writer, and it has this kind of quality of the Canadian Rockies and rural life that is really relatable. Next we have Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. I picked up this gorgeous hardback last year for a book club, and I really enjoyed it. I wouldn't have thought this would be my favorite book, but when I made the list, this is one that really stayed with me for its genre and its author and its characters. So it kind of says it in the name, but this is a kind of a classic Gothic story, but based in rural Mexico. So we follow Noemi, who goes to try to be with her cousin Catalina, who's married this man, and they now live in like really rural, I think it's an ex-mining town, and she's not well, so she goes to stay with her, and there's like the whole story kind of ensues from that. And it's, I don't know, I really enjoyed it. There's some trigger warnings about it, and some things that weren't perfect, obviously, but my book is. But I really enjoyed it. I would really recommend it, and I would definitely revisit it again, which I think is important for a favorite book. Next we have The Lost Light of St. Kilda by Elizabeth Gifford. This is also an arc that I picked up, I think it was actually just last year or the year before, and because I just love a book about Scotland, so when I saw it, I picked it up. I dream of going to St. Kilda one day, which is this tiny set of like island who are off the Outer Hebrides, so they're already quite far off in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and people used to live there up until the early 1900s, and then they were evacuated, mostly because it wasn't sustainable for their lifestyle to stay there, because it was cut off from mainland, you know, during the winters, and it was quite a difficult lifestyle. So anyway, so this book follows basically characters at the end of that period, just before they evacuated, and it's really beautiful and heart-wrenching to see their realities and how much they love the island and that kind of environment and their traditions. In parallel, we're also following a different timeline, which is, I think, is set during and after the Second World War, and characters trying to reunite. So it is really beautiful. You really have, Gifford does a really good job of setting the scene, you know. You feel like you're on the side of a cliff in the middle of the ocean, and you hear the birds and the Scottish accents, and it's really moody and evocative, which I adored, and I think I gave it a 5-star. So I really loved it, and I really recommend it. Okay, next is a bit random, but I did want to talk about Crazy Rich Asians by Kevin Kwan, and I mean the whole trilogy, so I have the other 2 books as well, China Rich Girlfriend and Rich People Problems. So I wouldn't say I would have given a 5-star to like none of these books, but I really enjoyed reading them, and it really surprised me because the stories are very different from the movie, and I love that she did other books that became more like a family saga, and that really drew me in. The writing is really good, it's really page-turner. I think you can read them really quickly, so it's a light read, but I don't think that should put them off, you know, of a favorite book list. I really enjoyed the different characters, the class kind of talk that goes with it, and same with culture differences and prejudices. Yeah, I didn't want to include them in here just because it's a bit of a dark horse. But I think Kwan is a very compelling writer, and yeah, it's really fun. I actually really recommend it to everyone. Next we have The Book Thief by Markus Zusak. So I read this book quite a long time ago now. I want to say like 7 years ago, so I don't remember it a lot, and I won't say that much about it, but it has stayed with me, and I think it has to do with the fact, coming back to the Map of Salt and Stars, to the fact that this is also through the eye of a child, and I really enjoyed it. Like a similar one is All the Lights That We Cannot See, something like that. Also kind of this similar Second World War through the eyes of a child. And yeah, so it follows Liesel, and it's in Nazi Germany. She's going off to live with a foster family, and then we follow her few years in life after that. It's really beautiful, and I recommend it. I didn't enjoy the movie as much, so if that disappointed you, I wouldn't be put off by the book, because the book is much better. Next we have The Shadow of the Wind, or La Sombra del Viento by Carlos Ruiz Zafón, who is a Spanish writer. I actually read this book in French and I gave my copy away, but yeah, it is one of my favorite books, and I think bookish people will kind of be drawn into it because it starts basically in a library and with a book. We follow Daniel, who lives in Barcelona, and he kind of is obsessed with this book and he tries to find the author, and then the story starts from there. There's loads of mysteries and twists and turns, and it is a really engaging book that will draw you in literally from the first page, which is rare for me anyway, to be drawn in, and I think it's maybe because it's about books, I'm always attracted by that. And it's very much about family relationships and love and, I don't know, identity, and yeah, just relationships generally between people. And because it is set at the end of the Second World War, there's also this aspect of the heart-wrenching, you know, disappearances and separation that happened during that time. So yeah, I really recommend Zafón's writing generally, but this one has been my favorite up to now. Last but not least, actually definitely not least, because throughout all of this list I don't think I've really had a ranking of the books, but this is definitely my favorite one. Homegoing by Yaa Gyasi. I picked up an arc from Homegoing quite a few years ago and I loved it so much I had to go buy myself a copy, and I think I bought copies from like my family and friends because it was just so good. So it is a bit of an intergenerational saga where it starts with two sisters, and I think it's Effia and Essie. Yes, so one ends up being sold into slavery and the other one ends up being married to a slave trader, and then you follow their lineage, so their descendants from there until modern day. It was so real, so touching, so smart, and it was just very... There's a compassion to this read that I enjoyed because I think it's a quite tough subject to approach, but it is done really well, which I think is why it stayed with me, because of the more serious topic but the beautiful way that she wrote about it. And I do love an intergenerational story, and she doesn't... They almost feel like short stories where she doesn't dwell that long into each people's lives, but you get the sense of connection throughout, and that's what's really beautifully done. So this is like the top book that I recommend to everyone, and that is worth revisiting, and I cannot wait to read her second book, which I'm hoping to pick up very soon. I know the list is technically done, but I just want to give two special mentions to these books. So the first is My Sister the Serial Killer by Oyinkan Braithwaite, and then The Old Man Who Read Love Stories, or El Viejo que leía Novelas de Amor by Luis Sepulveda. I don't know, these two books really stayed with me. They didn't quite make the list. Maybe I should have made a longer list, but these are two that I would also really recommend and I would revisit. My Sister the Serial Killer just, I think, blew out my expectations of the genre and of what I thought this book was gonna be, so I thought it was really excellent. And this one is a short novella by a Chilean writer that I don't know, I really enjoyed it. I read it in French, as you can tell. And I really enjoyed it. It was really beautiful. It's based in the Amazonian forest and follows this old man who just loves to read love stories, and it's kind of weaved into the story about this white man who comes and tries to hunt in this region. So yeah, two that I would also recommend. Alright, so these were my 10 favorite fiction books. Well, okay, maybe 12. If you've read any of them, I would love to know what you thought about them, if they're part of your favorite list or not. That's totally fine. I would love to know what your favorite book is as well, so please let me know in the comments below, and please like and subscribe, and hey, see you back!